Good evening. Welcome into State of the Tigers presented by James Carlton State Farm here on PowerMizzou.com, your favorite YouTube channel, or at least one of the YouTube channels you watch when your favorite YouTube channel has run out of videos for you to watch. So appreciate you guys hanging out. If you're here with us live, if you're watching during this show, hit the like button, subscribe, comment, share, do all of the appropriate YouTube user type things. Also get in touch with our friend James Carlton at State Farm Insurance in Webster Groves, Missouri. His information is going to be running across the bottom of the screen throughout the show. CarltonInsurance.net. You can call him at 314-961-4800. Talked to James a little bit this morning. He is pleased with how things are going for Mizzou, wants to help make them better through Mizzou's NIL effort. So if you get in touch with James and you tell him you heard about it, his agency on Power Mizzou, he's going to talk to you about ways to help Mizzou's NIL efforts and maybe even do a little bit of that himself if you get an insurance quote from him. We're going to bring in Drew King now. We're going to talk a little Missouri basketball on this show. Drew, I slept virtually the entire day yesterday after getting home from Lawrence, Kansas at 1 a.m. So hopefully you're equally recovered.
I also spent all of yesterday sleeping in. So sounds like we both needed a little bit of a recharge after that game.
Yeah, it was a productive day after, honestly, I don't know how productive a day on Saturday. Like after, I guess, 48 hours. Feel good about it? Feel bad about it? Feel somewhere in between?
I think if I'm Mizzou, I feel pretty good about it, but there's also a lot more pressure on these next two games now. So while like the performance was impressive, like you hung in there with the number 2 team in the country, it doesn't count for much, right? Like it's not gonna help you get into the NCAA tournament. You still need a couple of statement wins. And so these next 2 games are gonna be opportunities to pick those up.
Yeah, I think like the game, the effort, I feel good about in a couple ways. Number one, look, they didn't get blown out. They could, I mean, down 18, I most certainly thought they were getting blown out. I thought they'd lose by 25, and they didn't. So that's good. Number two, I thought it really showed some coaching acumen on Dennis Gates' part. I mean, he went in there and he knew he was undermanned, and he knew the other team had a guy that had been averaging 21 and, I don't know, 13, 14 a game, whatever Dickinson was averaging. And with a smaller, not as talented team, he took their best player more or less out of the game. I mean, Hunter Dickinson was relatively, like he wasn't bad. He just wasn't, he was ineffective for most of that game.
He only got 2 shots off in the first half, right? And we talked last week, like that was going to be a big deal for Missouri to be in this game, is to kind of deny him those post looks. Dennis Gates talked about how much they fronted him when he was on the block. And so, yeah, like I think what we wrote about was for about 34 minutes, Mizzou looked like the better team, right? They outscored them for most of the game. But when Mizzou hit a cold stretch, it got really, really bad, right? And so that's kind of the big red flag about the team right now is they've got like some real momentum killing moves in their arsenal that just like hit the brakes on everything.
Yeah, and want to invite you guys comments, questions. Feel free to put them in. We'll get to them throughout the show. If you have any, it happens almost every game, Drew. Like every game, there's a 4 or 5 minute stretch where and it's not just a couple points. It's nothing for 4 and 5 minutes at a time. And I don't know exactly why that is, but it's part of this team's DNA at this point.
Yeah, and I don't think that the Caleb Grill injury helped necessarily. We haven't
Right.
talked about that yet. Because he is a guy who was starting to come along the past couple of games. Didn't have the best start to the year, but had kind of found a little bit of a rhythm and was settling into his role. And now he's going to be out for the next month, so that's going to be pretty uh, hurtful, I think, coming up because you saw like Mizzou just didn't really have another option to go to after Sean East, right?
Hmm.
Had a really good first half and then kind of got slowed down a little bit the rest of the game. And like Connor Vanover just kind of had to make some stuff up in the second half to get them back into it. So I
Yeah.
don't know that that's something you can count on game in, game out is for Connor Vanover to go on a heater. Um, so yeah,
I
like
mean, the lob to him should be open literally all the time. I don't know
right.
how you would defend it.
Correct. But you do want you need that second option, right? And Nick
Yeah.
Honor tried his best, right? Didn't have a whole lot of success. Noah Carter never seemed to get going, and then everyone else, it was like 2 to 4 points each, right?
Yeah.
I don't remember anybody else really getting a good look off. So that's going to be the challenge for the team moving forward is, outside of Sean East, who can create offense.
So along those lines, like the more I thought about it, and I do think it was a good defensive effort on Saturday,
Yeah.
no question. And I think they're a much better defensive team than they were last year. But like even when they were up 8 points in those first 14 minutes, it was just it was Sean East throwing in everything he looked at. I mean, some of
Mhm.
them were good shots, but a couple of them were like, well, nobody's really moving, nobody's open, so I'm just going to go spin and like he threw in a couple shots that were you can't count on making those shots. So
Mhm.
I, even when they were playing well, like it didn't it's kind of like a golfer who goes out and makes 4 30-foot putts on the first 8 holes, right? Like it's cool, it counts in the score, but it's just not sustainable.
Correct. And I do think the venue does have a little bit to do with it, right? They do have these stretches every game. They're not always 20-2 runs though. And
Fair.
and so
Yeah.
like we saw Noah Carter airball a three, Nick Honor airball a three, Aiden Shaw like fumbled a couple of alley oops. Like those are plays we've seen them routinely make. And the only explanation I can kind of come up with is like it was a big game and maybe it got to them. Um,
Yeah.
so I don't know that we'll see those kinds of issues every time, but to have those issues against that team, that's what kind of doomed them, in my opinion.
Yeah. And I guess are we confident? Do we think a second option emerges, or is it just because, like, sometimes it can be Nick Honor, sometimes it can be Noah Carter. I think sometimes it maybe can be Tamar Bates.
Mhm.
Um, if John Tonje ever plays, maybe it can be him. But do we think there's a guy who it can consistently be?
Not at the moment. Like it's hard to see
Yeah.
10 games in. Like nobody has been yet. Um, and it's kind of only going to get tougher moving forward because you've got the next 2 games against Seton Hall and Illinois, and then you've got one kind of blood donor game against Central Arkansas, and then you're going straight into the SEC. So, like, if you wanted to figure out who that second guy was going to be, you'd have hoped it would have been during those first 10 games when the schedule was a little bit lighter.
Right. Before we go on, talk about some individual stuff, take questions, all that. If somebody brought this up to me today, and I kind of hadn't thought about it, but it's completely true. If they had just scored one more basket against Jackson State, how much better do we feel about things? I mean, they're 8-2. They a 9 point loss to KU and a loss to Memphis, which is pretty good. Like you wouldn't feel great about a 74-73 win over Jackson State, but it kind of would change everything people think about this team, I think.
Right. It at least wouldn't count against them in the grand
Right.
scheme of things, right? Because it's still a win. But now you're looking at being like 9-4 or 8-5 going into SEC play, and maybe it's 10-3. It's going to be really difficult to be 10-3, but like 9-4 and 8-3, that's like a really big hill to climb back up from. So and like the Jackson State loss, I've written about this. It's gonna be an anchor that's like tied to their ankle the whole way through.
Yeah.
So yes, you would feel 1,000 times better if they didn't have that loss, because like that's the one that stands out across the whole resume, is why did they lose to that team, that caliber of team?
Right. So Seton Hall Sunday in Kansas City at 4. I don't know how much you know about Seton Hall yet. I know you will know plenty about them by Sunday at 4. I will know probably about the same amount I know now, which is not anything, if we're being honest. But is this like they can't lose this game, right? To me, if they lose Sunday, then it's time to readjust expectations.
Yes. So Seton Hall, they remind me a lot of Pittsburgh a little bit,
Okay.
in that they don't have any bad losses, but they don't have any impressive wins either, right?
Right.
So their losses are against USC, Iowa, Baylor, and Rutgers. 3 of those are away from home. And then the best team they've beaten so far is Northeastern, which I couldn't tell you what state Northeastern plays from.
I'm going to guess Massachusetts. I'm going to Google it while you talk, but I think we're going to go Massachusetts.
Yeah. So yeah, but Rutgers is about like on a similar level as Missouri right now, and they beat Seton Hall on Seton Hall's home floor, 70-63, right? So with this game being in Kansas City, right, I expect a lot more Mizzou fans there than Seton Hall fans there. It's going to be a semi-home game for Missouri. Um, this should be a game that Missouri wins. But also, like Pittsburgh, like Seton Hall's a really physical team. They rebound well. They get their hands on steals a lot. So it's not going to be like an easy win, but it is almost a must win for Missouri.
Yeah, I think PJ Carlesimo's done a really nice job at Seton Hall. He's the last coach I remember from Seton Hall before Shaheen Holloway. Northeastern University, by the way, private university in Boston, Massachusetts.
Okay,
So
that is
I do know that Reggie Lewis went to school there.
Okay, there you go.
Rest in peace. But yeah, so but no, and it's no disrespect to Seton Hall. It's just the position Missouri's in. You schedule this game in Kansas City. It's basically a home game. And again, because of that Jackson State loss, and because Illinois is next, and Missouri could beat Illinois, but you don't count necessarily on a win over Illinois. You can't be 8-5 going into SEC play and have any realistic hopes of making the tournament, I don't think.
Correct. Yeah, that's just one too many losses, and the one that puts it over the top is the Jackson State loss.
Right, which almost kind of counts as 2 losses, to be honest. I want to hit up a couple of these questions, and because a couple of them do kind of focus on things we want to talk about anyway. So, who do you think will see the most minutes uptick with Grill out? Is it Pierce, Kurt Lewis, or John Tonje? I mean, as far as we're concerned, John Tonje's out too until further notice, right? Like, I just assume he's not playing until he magically plays.
Yeah. We don't have any clues on his availability either. Like Dennis Gates says, same as it always is. We have asked. If he is
same as it always is. But coach, I don't know what that means. Like, what is that?
I couldn't tell you. No, but if he is, like, if he does make his way onto the floor, I think that is somebody who could see a big minutes jump. As far as everybody else, I think Tamar Bates sees a minutes increase. I think Anthony Robinson will also get some extra minutes out of that in some of those 3-point guard lineups. Trent Pierce did play 11 minutes against
They,
Kansas. I don't know that we'll see that consistently, though. What are your thoughts on it?
I think they would love for it to be Trent Pierce, but he just doesn't look ready. I mean, look, I agree with all the people on our message board that I'm not sure where the hype came from. I don't know what they saw in this summer because I haven't seen it yet.
Mm-hmm.
I would love to see it because mostly I just like to be right. And we said all summer, hey, this kid's supposed to be really good. And we just, I mean, they got that lead down to 8. And I know Dennis praised Trent's defense on Saturday, and I will trust him that he played good defense. But they got that lead down to 8, and he had a wide open 3 on the wing. And I think you'll attest. As soon as he shot it, I said, oh no. And you made a good point. You said he's got to take that shot. I mean, if he's on the floor, he's got to take that shot because it was wide open.
Yep.
But I just didn't have any belief that it was going in. And it was at a time where if that shot does go in, it changes the game. And then Missouri got to stop. And then the next possession, he had a turnover. And like, look, these guys know way more about basketball than I do. And what they told me, I have to believe eventually comes to fruition. But it's not happened yet with Pierce.
Yeah, I think what we talked about when he took that shot was it was a good shot. You just wish it had been somebody else taking it, right? Because like Trent just has not had it going yet. Oh, I don't know that we've seen him make too many of those. Like, and a lot of them
he
have
made
been
a
wide
couple
open
plays
like
in the comeback against Minnesota, and you kind of
yeah.
thought maybe that gets him going, and it just didn't.
It has not, no. And the other thing is like it wasn't one specific person who was hyping Trent up this summer
It was
to us, right?
everybody.
Everybody was talking about him. And part of it too was like they went to Jamaica and they have the inter-squad scrimmage and they're like Trent Pierce, 20 points, 10 rebounds, right? So that kind of perks your ears up a little bit. And especially given everything that we were told. So yeah, it's been a really confusing season for Trent. If he does find some kind of rhythm, absolutely he could be a guy that steps in for Caleb Grill over the next couple of weeks. And maybe he'll get more opportunities to do that. Kansas probably wasn't the best time to give him a minutes bump. But yeah, like if somebody were to emerge from Missouri, that might definitely be a guy because we think he's talented, right? It just hasn't shown up in actual games yet.
Hasn't clicked. Here's another guy. Now, this is interesting. Mike says it's weird seeing Aiden Shaw no longer shoot threes. I mean, there was a point, and it was with like 2.5, 3 minutes left. It was pretty late in the game. But Aiden got the ball, not exactly on the wing, but out kind of on the wing, beyond the 3-point line. I mean, there was nobody within 7 feet of it. And he didn't even think about shooting it. He shot some of those last year. Gates says he wants every guy on his team to shoot threes. I don't know, man. The confidence for Aiden Shaw offensively seems to have disappeared to me. I don't know exactly why, but and look, I understand he didn't have the most polished offensive game, but he could make a jump shot. And now it's almost like he's been told not to shoot the ball outside the lane. And that would go against everything Dennis has ever said about any player he's had. So I don't really think that that's the case, but it's kind of tough to pick. Like, he has to be a threat from, I mean, why did KU win that game? Because Hunter Dickinson and KJ Adams showed they could make a 12-foot shot. That's all Shaw has to do. He doesn't have to score from 26 feet, but he does have to be able to shoot from 15.
So I think it's 2 parts to this answer. First, kind of like you said, it was late in the game. It wasn't over yet necessarily. And so I think if I'm Aiden, I also probably wouldn't take that shot just because I want to make sure it goes to somebody who is more reliable out there. Like, would you have been confident from Aiden taking the 3 in that spot, just like Trent would?
Probably not, but there was about 2 minutes and 15 seconds left. And rather than, I mean, it was as open again. If you're on the floor, you got to take the shot.
Yeah. But also like there wasn't really anybody in his way to the rim either,
True.
right? So I would have liked to see him drive in there, right, and kind of suck some defenders in and kick it out. That's a part of Aiden's game that even if he's not a shooter, like that's a way you can help on offense
Yep.
is just make the defense react a little bit because, like you said, there was nobody within 7 feet of him, and he kind of just stood there and waited for somebody to come get the ball from him. So you do need him to be a little bit more of a threat there, to help in those spots because as much as he's improved defensively and as much of an impact as he's making on the boards, he's kind of been a zero on offense,
Yeah.
right?
And this team doesn't have enough on offense to play 4-on-5.
Mhm.
Like there's already enough holes that you can't have a guy out there who's not going to shoot the ball outside 4 feet.
Exactly. Yeah. And he did take those shots last year. I think he shot like 25%. He was like
Like
3
I
for
don't think he
12.
made a ton of them, but he would take them.
Right. And like Dennis Gates always says, he'll take shots over turnovers. So I don't remember exactly how that specific play ended, but I don't think it would have been the worst thing in the world for Aiden to pull up.
Yeah, so you'd like to see him get some of that back. So Aiden, has like we talked a lot about who could be the second kind of option on this team, and Aiden says who should it be? Who should Gates trust to be that guy? I know who he does trust. I don't know if that's who he should trust.
Who he should trust? I don't think there's a good answer here.
That's fair.
Like
look, if Missouri's going to be good, is it fair to say it needs to be Noah Carter? Like if they're going to get where they're going to go, he doesn't have to be Kobe, but he can't be what he was saying.
Yeah,
he can't basically not show up offensively.
Correct. And to be
fair, Kobe had games like that last year, if you remember.
Yeah, no, Kobe had to pull himself out of the game against Wichita State because he felt like
in the KU game last year. I mean, I distinctly remember, and I didn't think it was wrong after the KU game last year. The narrative on Kobe Brown was, yeah, he can put up a lot of points against bad teams, and then all of a sudden he could put up a lot of points against everybody. Now, I'm not saying that's going to happen for Noah, but I think because he scored 28 in his third game here. We've seen him hit 4 or 5 threes. We've seen him. I think it was the Pittsburgh game where he just kind of bullied guys down low.
Yeah.
So he can do it. I think that's got to be the answer if they're going to go where they want to go.
And to be fair to Noah, like he did have to come out early with the cramp at like the 8-minute mark, so maybe he also finds a rhythm late in the game there, but he wasn't doing too much before he got hurt. He was getting boards, but on offense, he had the air ball. I think that affected his confidence a little bit. So yeah, Noah Carter. I think the other thing with him is we talk about like how he bullies guys on the post. It usually helps when those guys aren't Hunter Dickinson and KJ Adams, who are two big and strong guys like that. But like he's gonna be up against that a lot in the SEC is the thing. So you either need him to make his outside shots or really get crafty on the block and find ways to score around bigger opponents.
Yeah, and I mean, I think right now the guy that Gates thinks Nick Honor is that guy.
Mm-hmm.
He has been at times, no question. There are times. I mean, he got hot and brought him back against Minnesota. He was the one that I can't remember what game it was that he hit a huge 3 to force overtime last year.
Mississippi State
in Columbia. Yeah, so he can, but we've just seen he's so limited what he can do in the lane because of his size that I don't know if you can reliably think that's going to happen again and again.
I think the other thing too is he's like a step slower than Sean East. Sean can speed past some guys and get to the rim that way. Nick Honor he's getting met by the help defender every single time. And so then it's like he's waiting for somebody to cut, and it never comes. We talked a lot during the game about how like Mizzou just kind of seems stagnant. They kind of just stand around and watch the ball rather than getting something going on the weak side. So yeah, with Nick, I credit him for trying, right? Because nobody else was really getting anything done with the ball in their hands, right?
Yeah.
But he hasn't been a great second option so far,
Right.
outside of shooting the three ball, because he's shooting like 47% from there,
Is he really?
something like that. I'll double check.
I'm stunned. It's that good, honestly.
45.9%.
Wow, that's incredible. I would not have guessed it was that high. So we're going to talk recruiting here in just a minute, but I want to get to Christopher's question. Should we be excited about the lack of success from the rest of the SEC because it might be easier for Mizzou to finish with a better record, or be worried that it may hurt a bubble team? It's kind of the yin and yang, right? Like you kind of like looking around and going, hey, they've got the sixth best record in the SEC, so maybe that's good. But like these are the teams you're going to be playing, and you need wins that are going to impress somebody. And if they're all losing games and don't have any great non-conference wins, then who are you really impressing if you go beat a bunch of those teams?
Right. And it was a better weekend for the SEC, right? Tennessee took down Illinois. Auburn demolished Indiana. So there was a little bit of a leveling out for the conference. Ken Palm has the SEC as his number 2 conference right now, which is where I think they were at the end of last season. But it's a really tight race with them, the Big Ten, and the Big East, right? It's like a couple of decimal points between the three of them. So yeah, you want the conference to close out strong here, and those losses to bad teams, like those are gonna dry up some of the at-large bids come March, because the selection committee isn't going to look on those losses too favorably.
Yeah, so we'll wrap this up with this. I kind of put my tiers for SEC basketball out there this morning. I'm curious. Just tell me. I'll read you each tier, and you tell me where I'm wrong or where I'm right. Tier 1: A&M, Tennessee, and Kentucky. Is there somebody else that should be on that tier, or should one of those teams not be there?
No, I think that's pretty accurate. Yeah, I would have those 3 in the top 3.
Tier 2: Arkansas, Alabama, Auburn, Mississippi State. And I'm not sure. I initially forgot Mississippi State. I didn't even include them in the SEC. So I stuck them there. They easily could have been in tier 3, to be quite honest, because I'm not sure I put them on the level of those other 3. Also, they don't start with an A, so they didn't really fit there.
Yeah, and they're also missing Tolu Smith right now. So I think once they get him back, they'll kind of solidify their spot. I think they're probably on the fence between those tiers right now.
Tier 3, I had Mizzou, Ole Miss, Florida, South Carolina. And I said 1 or 2 of those has the chance to move up to tier 2 and be a bubble team, a tournament team at the end of the year. I don't know which ones, because I'm not sure where those teams separate.
Yeah, so how many teams did you have in the first 2 tiers combined?
3 in tier 1, 4 in tier 2. So
okay.
Yeah, so I think one of those teams could switch places with one of the teams in tier 2 with Mississippi State, or just, hey, maybe if the SEC is better than we think, maybe they find a way to get 8 in. I kind of doubt that, but
yeah, it's going to be tough to get 8 in again this year. So if you're Missouri, like you're kind of looking on the outside in right now. And so when we talk about
Seton Hall, at least in my tiers, which I know the selection committee will ask.
Yes, very, very true. I do agree with what you're saying though, because like I wouldn't say that Missouri's on par with an Alabama or an Arkansas right now. So there's work to do for sure. But yeah, I think that's pretty accurate through the top 3 tiers.
So if I put it, and then tier 4 is Vanderbilt, Georgia, and LSU, and we don't care about those teams. If I tell you Mizzou, Ole Miss, Florida, South Carolina, if I tell you one of those teams does enough in SEC play to get into the tournament, who is it?
Does enough in SEC. So here's the thing. This is going to sound crazy. South Carolina has the best non-conference resume out of those four. Their only loss is to Clemson, which was on the road. They beat Notre Dame. They beat DePaul. Beat Virginia Tech. Like, those are high major wins.
Those are teams I've heard of. They're not good teams, but they're teams I've heard of.
Yeah. I still don't totally trust them.
No, not at all.
Like, even the Clemson loss, like, Alabama had a worse loss against Clemson, and they played Clemson at home. South Carolina was on the road and made it a closer game. Ole Miss is still undefeated, but I don't trust them either. Like, because a lot of those wins are against bad teams, and it was by 1 point. So I don't know that they're going to be great, even though they've got Musa Cisse eligible. So I think it's a toss-up between Florida and Mizzou, but I wouldn't put money on either team, one over the other.
If I had to say, I think it's a toss-up between Mizzou and Ole Miss because I believe in Chris Beard, and I'm not sure I yet believe in Todd Golden. I mean, it's not about personnel, it's not about resume. That's just kind of where I stand with those. So let's get to. We had 2 or 3 people ask this. How confident are you guys in Mizzou landing Aaron Rowe tomorrow? Would be an excellent start to the 2025 class. So Aaron is set to announce his commitment at, I believe it's 4:15 tomorrow afternoon. I would say we both feel extremely confident about Missouri's chances. I mean, he moved back to Columbia. About 3 weeks later, he took an official visit to Missouri. And 10 days after that, he was ready to commit.
Yeah.
I don't really think you have to connect a whole lot of dots or be very good at connecting dots to connect those dots.
The dots are there to connect. Let's just say that. But yeah, no, I think that, like you said, like it's been one thing after another and in a very short amount of time. And it's been a guy that they've liked for a while now. So considering that he's from Columbia, it's a school he's familiar with. Like, yeah, I think that there's a lot of reasons to believe that it's going to be Mizzou for Aaron Rowe.
And to get, I mean, look, it's 11 months till signing day. To get a top 25 player who is a point guard, so that tells me he's got some kind of natural leadership skills to be the lead recruiter of your 2025 class. I mean, if that happens tomorrow afternoon, that's a huge victory for Dennis Gates.
Yeah, I mean, Honor Boateng is kind of the crown jewel of the 2024 class, and Aaron Rowe is like on par with that level of talent. You know, he could potentially be a 5-star commit by the time the cycle's over with, because he's got a lot of time left, obviously, till he steps foot on a college campus. So yeah, I think that having that kind of momentum roll over into this 2025 class after what you just accomplished with the 2024 cycle, like that's going to be a big deal. I don't know that it's going to be another 5-man class this time around, but
you almost kind of hope it's not, because that means you guys have left, right? That you kind of probably don't want to leave.
So I don't know that it's going to be like a super huge class, but it does help to lead off with that kind of a talent if he ends up committing to Mizzou.
And I think, I mean, this is how long Aaron Rowe, I think I first heard about Aaron Rowe when he was in 7th or 8th grade. And then, like he's been a big name to Missouri fans long enough that like people were wondering why Konzo Martin didn't offer him sooner. So like he's been well known, going back 3-4 years now. And he's just, I guess he's finishing up his junior year. He'll be eligible for second semester at Tolton as a junior. I forget which game exactly, but I know he's going to be eligible second semester. He's going to start out with a home game. So I think that would be a big deal for local fans to kind of get a look at this kid who's been a hot name. I mean, don't get me wrong, this isn't Michael Porter. It's not that level,
Right.
but he's definitely a well-known kid around here, and I think would be a really nice way to start off the 25 class, which, like you said, would follow up the 24 class. And it kind of leads into kind of what I want to finish with. And I mentioned this morning, and a couple of people said it on Saturday. Like, if you look at the way he recruited for 24, and if he gets Aaron Rowe to start 25 next year, like, you almost can, it's okay if this year's a little step back, right? Like, there is a chance that this is Dennis Gates' worst year as Missouri's head coach. And I'm not talking about worst of the two. I'm talking about if the next couple classes are indicative of the kind of talent he's going to bring in, there's a chance it's his worst year as long as he's here.
Yeah. Yeah, no, because we knew coming in it was probably going to be a little bit of a step back this year, and so far it has been. We'll see how big of a step back it ends up being, but yeah, like you're talking about, bringing in a top 5 class next year, and then if you're adding to that like a 2025 point guard and whatever else he is able to they're able to pair him with, like, that's going to be 8 or 9 guys that are probably going to be in the top 150. Like, these are not going to be kind of what it was before Dennis Gates got here.
Right. And you're talking about this 3-man class, even the current freshman class, they were all top 150 guys. And I think it's fair to say that, Robinson and Butler, I think, are overachieving what we expected coming into the year. And Trent Pierce is not underachieving what his ranking is.
Yeah.
He's just underachieving some of the things we got caught up in hearing over the summer. But like, it's not unusual for Trent Pierce to not be hitting the ground scoring 15 points a game as a true freshman that was ranked like 125th. Like, it takes those guys a year usually.
Yeah, no, like, I think Ant Robinson has been like a very pleasant surprise, because you didn't necessarily expect the 120th ranked guy to be impacting this way as soon as he steps foot on a college campus. And so, yeah, like Trent Pierce, it might take him a little bit longer than expected, but that doesn't mean that like he's underachieving his ranking.
No. All right. So again, 4:00 Sunday afternoon. We assume, I don't know, we'll probably get to talk to Dennis and somebody or other sometime this week. It's finals week. It's always a little bit weird. This is a strange time of year in basketball. They play once a week for like 3 weeks and then take a week off. But we will, whatever happens, Drew's certainly going to cover it. He and I are going to drive back up I-70 on Sunday afternoon and hang out at the T-Mobile Center, watch Mizzou Seton Hall. I will be back Thursday night. We're going to hang out with Gerard Hamilton, maybe Sean Williams. We're going to talk a little football, a little recruiting, transfer portal, things like that. So appreciate all you guys hanging out with us. Hit the like button, share, subscribe to the channel. You'll get notifications when we go live. We may do that Sunday evening from T-Mobile. We'll see how things go. But if you're listening on the podcast, make sure to leave nice comments, give us a good review, share it on social media, and remind you one more time to get in touch with our friend James Carlton at State Farm Insurance, carltoninsurance.net, on the phone at 314-961-4800 during regular business hours. James has been a good partner of ours for a couple of years now, and really appreciate all his help. So I want to make sure that you guys help him out, and he wants to help Mizzou's NIL efforts as well. So thanks for joining us, guys. We'll talk to you next time.